Hey guys, Tyler Berger here with Bass Fishing HQ, and today I want to tell you about 5 different lures that you need to use in 50-degree water, so stay tuned, it's going to be a good one. This video is brought to you by Sportsman'sOutfitters.com. Right now, Sportsman's Outfitters is actually doing their Black Friday sale, so you can save a lot of big money on some really expensive items, whether that's your favorite fishing reel or your favorite lure or your favorite fishing line. If you click the link below in the description, you can save big bucks right now for all your fishing needs that you're gonna need for next year. You're going to want to take advantage of this sale while it lasts. Get stocked up. Again, sportsmansoutfitters.com. So when it comes to fishing, to me, I really feel like the 50-degree mark, anywhere from 50 degrees to 59 degrees, is really kind of special. During the spring, I cannot wait until that water temperature hits 50 degrees. And during the fall, same thing. Once it hits 59 and it starts getting lower, that 50-degree range really to me is just a magical time. While the water temperature is kind of in that 50-degree range, you really have one of the best opportunities that you will have all year long to catch some of the biggest bass of the entire year. Again, whether that's in the springtime for you, in the fall time, or maybe it's even in the dead of winter. Now, real quick, I am talking about Fahrenheit and not Celsius. I know there's a lot of people that watch this channel that are actually outside of the US where we are weird and use Fahrenheit. There's really a ton of lures that can be really productive in this water degree range. So the lures that I have selected today, I've really selected because I think that they produce some of the biggest bass in your lake. Whether you fish tournaments or whether you just like to go out and have fun catching fish, whether that's bank fishing or in a lake, no matter what, if you're in this water degree range, these lures that I'm about to share with you are going to catch some of the biggest bass in your body of water. So let's dive right into them. All right, so the first lure, and probably the one that I use the most, is a chatterbait. A chatterbait or a vibrating jig is one of the best lures to use in this range. You know, there's just something that I think bass really like about a big thump when you're fishing kind of in this 50-degree range. I don't know what it is, but there's several lures, and some of the ones that we're gonna talk about, that they have a big thump to them. And because they have that big thump, it just seems like you catch some bigger than average fish on baits like a chatterbait. Now, there are a ton of different vibrating jigs on the market. There are a ton of different chatterbaits on the market that all have different blades. Right here, I'm holding up the big blade. I actually just did a video about this exact lure on my channel, and I was actually fishing it in about 56-degree water temperature. I really caught a lot of bass on it, and I really just had a lot of fun. Now, when it comes to fishing this lure, there's a couple of different situations that I really like for a chatterbait. One is really off-color or heavily stained water. If you get into some muddy water, sometimes that really aggressive vibration can be really what the bass want. It really helps them to kind of hone in on that bait. Again, whether you're fishing this in the fall, the winter, or the spring. Now, a lot of times when I'm fishing this in that stained water, that heavily stained water, I'm gonna be fishing it around a lot of wood cover. So sometimes I like to change up my trailer on there to really help this bait get through that wood cover a lot more efficiently. Now, the other situation that I love that chatterbait is anytime you have aquatic vegetation. There's no doubt that the chatterbait is one of the best lures at actually coming through that vegetation without it getting completely fouled up on the lure. So anytime I'm in that water degree range and I have some grass in the lake, I'm gonna be throwing a chatterbait a lot. I'm ripping this bait out of the grass, letting it flutter down, and that's when the bass get it. Moving on to lure number 2, this is one of my favorites to throw, and that's a deep diving crankbait. A lot of us, when we think of a deep diving crankbait, we think about the summertime, kind of that post-spawn, that first part of summer, when a deep diving crankbait can also be a very good lure to throw. But I have seen that some of the biggest schools of offshore fish that you're going to run into actually happen during that pre-spawn time of the year, and sometimes even during the fall, but especially during the pre-spawn. Before those fish actually move up into that shallow water, a lot of times you're gonna find them on some secondary points, or you're gonna find them on some just offshore structure or offshore cover. Maybe that's a stump that's outside of a spawning flat. Whatever it may be, a deep diving crankbait is a great tool to use to catch those fish. Now, one specific crankbait that I really like to use, especially during this water degree range, is the Strike King 5 and the Strike King 5 XD. The thing that I like about these lures is it's not quite as big of a presence as a Strike King 6 or a 6 XD, so it doesn't have quite the vibration. And sometimes I think if you're fishing this in, in a little bit deeper water, because these are gonna run anywhere from about 10 to 15 foot deep, you wanna have a little bit of clarity to the water, and having a little bit tighter wiggling crankbait, I think that bass really love in that water degree range, which again is 50 to 59 degrees. Strike King 5, Strike King 5 XD, I'm telling you, this is one of the best lures that you can use. And just so you know, I'm gonna put all the links to the very specific lures that I'm talking about down below in the description. If you guys want to pick some up, feel free to click on those links. All right, I know that I have just said for probably the last two lures that they were my favorite lures, but I think that this actually takes the cake. This next lure, lure number 3, I think this is my favorite one to throw, especially in that water degree range, 50 to 59, and that is a buzzbait. A buzzbait is a phenomenal lure to use in colder water. And again, this is a lure that I think a lot of guys don't even pick up until the summertime. And I'm telling you what, whether it's that pre-spawn time frame or whether you're late in the fall, a buzzbait is one of the best ways to catch some really, really big bass. And I'm telling you what, I've actually caught bass on buzzbaits in 47-degree water before. They will hit it when the snow is coming down. They will hit it in really, really cold water. You just gotta crank it a little bit slower across the surface. Now, again, along with several of these lures, you're not gonna get a ton of bites on a buzzbait, but the ones that you get are going to be big ones. A lot of guys are thinking about different lures and they're not thinking about a topwater like a buzzbait. And I can't even express this to you enough. This is, honestly, it's one of the best lures you can use in that 50-degree range. Lure number 4, this is a big fish killer. And again, like I talked about earlier, I think that range from 50 to 59, you have a great opportunity to catch some of the biggest bass that live in your lake, and this bait is going to do it. And that is a bigger glide bait, just like the one that I have right here. You know, really all types of swim baits actually work pretty well in this degree range. I mean, from your Kitech style baits, your Rage Tail swimmer style baits, all the way up to these bigger swim baits. Now, the thing about a glide bait is this one just takes some practice. Like if you have not fished glide baits before, it just takes a little bit getting used to. You really have to use a pretty big rod and reel to kind of manage a bait that weighs several ounces. This is one of the most fun bites that you can get on when the fish are actually eating the thing. Now, sometimes you're gonna have fish follow this bait out, and that can be really, really frustrating. Sometimes you can come back with, a wacky rig or a jig to those same fish and catch them, but when they're biting this bait, it is one of the best ones to use, again, in this degree range. Now, the thing about a glide bait is it's a pretty conditional bait. You really need the right conditions in order to throw this bait and in order to get a lot of fish to strike this bait. Now, there's 3 things that I'm looking for. And one, I want clear water. It doesn't have to be absolutely gin clear, but you really want probably 3 foot of visibility or more. The second thing is you need some sort of ripple on the water. It doesn't need to be absolutely howling, but some sort of ripple across the water, a little bit of wave action. Something needs to break up that surface in order for the fish to actually strike this bait and not just follow it. Now, the third thing that I like to have, but I don't think it's always necessary, is sunlight. Because you're fishing in clear water, the fish tend to be more sight oriented, so that sun just kind of helps the fish see this from a long ways away. But I don't think that you always need to have the sunlight. Really, I want clear water and a little bit of chop, a little bit of wind first. But if you have some cloudy days or some intermittent sunny, cloudy days, that's okay. I still think that this bait can work really well. Now, if you guys haven't thrown glide baits a lot, this is the bait that I'm going to recommend. This is the Storm Arashi glide bait. Again, I'll leave a link down below. The thing about this bait is it's not uber expensive. It's still an expensive bait. I think it comes in at around 20, maybe it's $29 right now on sportsmansoutfitters.com. But the thing about it is some of these baits are $100, $200, $300, $400 for a glide bait. I'm no swim bait expert by any means. I am not a swim bait expert, but this has caught me some fish, and I know it was produced by Brandon Polinick, and that guy loves a big swim bait, and this is what he designed, especially for the beginner fisherman, the fisherman who hasn't fished a glide bait a lot. So the Storm Arashi is one that I'm definitely gonna recommend. All right, so we've come down to the last lure, and gosh, these are all like some of my favorite lures. I don't want to say that this is my favorite because I know I've said it about basically every one of these baits, but the next bait is a jig. And again, a jig, there's just a special place in my heart because I have caught so many big bass on jigs throughout my lifetime. I just have a ton of confidence in this bait. Again, you're not always going to get a ton of bites, but when you do, they tend to be bigger bites. And the thing about a jig is it's a very versatile bait, right? And I'm not just talking about one specific jig here. I like to use several different jigs when I'm fishing in this water temp that we're talking about. You know, one might be a football jig. I might throw a football jig out deep. The other jig might be some sort of swim jig, something about swimming a jig through some lily pads or around some reeds or even around some brush, or even kind of like the jig that I have here, which is just a jig that I would flip into a laydown log. I would skip it underneath of a dock. Now, two of my favorite jigs that I really like to use, one is a Missile Baits mini flip. The reason that I like that bait is it's very compact, so it tends to get a lot of bites, but the thing about it is it has a bigger hook on it. So you can use big line, you can use 20-pound line. You could probably get away with braid, but you might bend out the hook if you have a hard hook set like I do. You can use that mini flip. It's a very small presentation, so you tend to get a lot of bites on it, but you can also catch a lot of quality fish on it. If you guys haven't fished jigs a whole lot, you know, that might be a jig that I would recommend because it's a little bit more finessey and it helps you to get a lot of bites. Now, if you're just looking for one jig, you're like, okay, Tyler, I don't have a lot of money to spend on a lot of different jigs. The one that I'm gonna recommend is a Strike King structure jig. And the reason that I'm gonna recommend that structure jig is because that structure jig was originally created to fish offshore, but it can go through cover really well. It's one of the best skipping jigs on the market. You can skip it underneath docks, you can put it in a laydown, you can fish it offshore, you can do everything you want with that particular jig. That's a real specific jig that I'll link down below, but if you're just at the store and trying to pick up a jig, look for something that has an Arky style jig head. That Arky style jig head is a very versatile jig. One lure that I didn't talk about that really does work well in this water temperature is a spinnerbait. And the reason that I didn't talk about it on this video is because I actually talked about it on this video. This is the video that I did where I actually talk about 7 different lures that work in 40-degree water temperatures. So if you like this video, you might like this one as well. Please subscribe to the channel, comment below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.